So thank you for coming to our virtual meeting. I thought that we could start by talking about the courthouse opening on June 1st, since I think that's a little sooner. So I know you said that you had some details about how that's going to look and what's going to be allowed and not allowed. So if you can go into that a little bit.
Sure. This morning I entered an administrative order that's going to allow the opening of the courthouse to non-essential matters. As you probably know, the courthouse has been open ever since the contraction of services, which was on or about March 17, when we contracted down to 4 courtrooms and began to hear only what we call essential matters. And those would include such things as bond court, rights court, petitions for order of protection, no stalking, any of those types of protective orders. There was also the felony court, the misdemeanor court, the summary suspensions, things that had to be heard. And in order to accomplish that safely with the help of really a lot of people, a lot of departments, Kathy Keefe, her office, the sheriff's department, we went down to 4 courtrooms on the first floor, and basically access to the rest of the building was very, very restricted. So that's where we were. I would like to let Kathy address what they had to do, because it was incredible what her office did, what Kathy and her office did pertaining to pushing, or we'll call continuing, I guess probably the thousands of cases that had to be pushed out over time. So Kathy, why don't you address that, what you did?
Okay, so we have been continuing to work. We've had our staff, the first couple of weeks we were all in-house working, full staff here, because we were really working on the noticing issues that we had in the beginning, all the rescheduling we were doing. We moved after that to they're working 3 days at home and 2 days here in the office. We've got a lot of project work going on. The Supreme Court changed the rules a couple of years ago to allow us to destroy cases that are scanned. So we had a lot of verification that we never get time to do in order to allow us to destroy all these cases. So that's the type of project work we've had our staff doing from home since then, and are probably going to be able to destroy upwards of 1,000, closer to 2,000 boxes of archived cases, based on the work that we've been able to do during this downtime. But the noticing and the rescheduling really has been a huge project for our office over these last couple of months. We rescheduled around 24,000 court events, basically the court dates, but mailed out almost 48,000 notices during the last at least that was our last count. The noticing does keep continuing. We do have some dates out in the summer that have too many people scheduled on them now. So we have been continuing with the noticing. It seems like every day we identify another date out in the summer that's got too many people scheduled. So the noticing does continue, but that really has been a massive undertaking. Any of that, we've had our great IT staff, who's been able to produce some of these notices on the fly, and just a lot of staff stuffing window envelopes with notices. So that has been a large undertaking.
The other thing that we did before we get to June 1 particular matters is started hearing some things remotely through all the different video platforms, whether it be court calls, Zoom, or WebEx. We started doing remote rights court or bond court in the morning, that of course was essential, had to be done every day. We set that up down in a separate room, down in emergency management, whereby the people that were defendants arrested, brought in, have to see a judge within 48 hours. And we did that remotely from that room into the jail, and with Dave Christensen from emergency management and the sheriff's department, that worked out very well. In fact, going forward, we're going to continue to do that and eventually move those remote hearings to the courtrooms. There'll be probably mid-June, we'll be taking those back to a couple of courtrooms. Other remote things that have been done during that time are the specialty courts. Staffing still have to be done or had to be done. And Judge Feeder did many of those remotely. I've done some involuntary admission and treatment hearings remotely with myself in my chambers with a court reporter, the state's attorney in his office, the public defender representing the client patient at the hospital with the client patient witnesses there. So we've done remote hearings. So we've learned a lot during the past 63 days, I think it is, on how to handle some of these things. And we're going to implement many of these same things commencing June 1. So I think really we're trying to prod me to talk about what we're going to do June 1. So why don't we go there? We are opening all the courtrooms. We're opening the building to non-essential matters. You might call that regular court, but of course nothing's regular anymore. With the help of Kathy, we are changing court times. So instead of a crowd showing up at either 8:30 or 9, we're staggering those out throughout the morning, moving some particular cases to the afternoon to try to spread out the folks that come in, so we don't have a mass of people trying to get through security at the doors in the morning or the afternoon. Some of the other things that we've done would be just the security in the building, and by that I mean the social distancing. I am requiring all patrons who enter to wear a face covering or a mask and to maintain their social distance. We walked the building. Kathy was in on that when we walked around and figured out you can't have 4 chairs at a particular table anymore. Chairs were moved, furniture's been removed. The courtrooms have been marked off as to what seating is available. It's amazing if you go into a courtroom that you're just used to having 40 people in there, that once you mark it off, you might get 10. You might get, if you're lucky, 12 people. So that's why the staggering is important. And that's why we're going to be very careful about numbers we let in at the time. We also understood we just couldn't push the problem out to the hallways. So we've taken steps by reducing numbers with the help of Kathy for folks coming in. The other thing that we've done is we decided, after seeing that some of these remote hearings were working, that we would attempt to see if we could actually have certain court calls operate virtually. And we are running a pilot program next week for traffic court, small claims court, and one of the divorce courts through Zoom, a virtual courtroom. We set up guidelines. Judge Justin Hansen was integral in setting those guidelines up, working on that document, getting that prepared, along with the help of Judge Jennifer Johnson. I mean, they really dug in when I gave them the go-ahead. We had set up a committee, which Judge Hansen's the chair of that committee. Kathy's on that committee. We had to have a lot of participants, not just judges. We needed clerks. We needed people from specialty courts. We needed a lot of different people to have input on those guidelines. And that is part of the reestablishment plan. You'll see that toward the back of the reestablishment plan. So we're going to operate these courtrooms next week virtually. I got to tell you, I'm very excited about that. I'm hoping that everything works well. I do understand that there'll be some sort of minor problem here and there, but that's why we're doing it as a pilot to see if it'll work. If it works, I'm looking to implement that throughout the summer, and who knows how long, really into the fall. I mean, we're just going to have to see how things go. We're going to have to modify things as time progresses. We're looking at, well, what we did do is our jury assembly room. I know Katie's familiar with that room. Used to hold 100 and what, Kathy, 125 people, something like that?
130. Yeah,
130 maybe. Well, now it holds 38 if you do social distancing. So we're having jurors come in. We've set up the appropriate distance between the chairs. The procedures in there will be modified, so there's not sharing of things, things of that nature. But the other thing we're going to do then is to use that room as a jury courtroom on a temporary basis, because if you go into one of our jury courtrooms, you find that you can't put 12 jurors in the jury box. You just can't do it. You might get 4. If you're lucky, some of the courtrooms might get 5, and then you have to spread chairs out. I mean, it's really a daunting task to figure out who you can get in and how you can set it up. So we're going to use the jury assembly room as a temporary courtroom because it's our largest room. Obviously, the number of trials that we're going to be able to conduct are going to be down. We've got the plan to prioritize which trials are going to be heard, and that's how we're going to start. Do you have more questions regarding any of that?
That was one of my questions, was what is a jury trial going to look like in all of this? So that's helpful to know. As far as continuing to implement like virtual court hearings and trials, is there any plan to move that into the criminal court if things go well? Or are you thinking civil and traffic mainly?
Well, we're thinking civil, the family courts, the dissolution, or they used to be called the divorce courts, and traffic. As far as criminal, we're not closing the door, but the criminal creates particular problems depending on the type of proceeding you might want to hold. Defendants have certain constitutional rights, and using a virtual courtroom or a remote hearing might infringe on some of those rights. I mean, defendants have the absolute right to be present for essential proceedings in their case. Now, what is essential? That could be open to argument. I'm not saying we won't go virtual for some things in criminal, but it would be very limited.
I think Judge Cowlin maybe downplayed a little bit the undertaking of doing traffic court virtually, because across the state, I think everyone is watching to see how our traffic court pilot goes. I really don't. A lot of people have used Zoom to do different hearings, smaller hearings, that only involve a few parties. I think, I'm not positive, but we may be one of the first to actually attempt to do a regular traffic call over Zoom. And I think that's what a lot of the counties are looking at to see how that's going to go, because the traffic call and that small claims call are the two that have the most bodies. They're the biggest. Katie, you've seen the amount of people standing outside that traffic courtroom. And so I think that's the one other courts are really interested in seeing how that traffic call is going to go. And I really do think we've got a great plan for it. And Judge Johnson seems to feel we're going to be able to offer that, even going forward into the summer, to be able to give people the option to either appear in person or to appear through Zoom and manage both those kind of at the same time in the courtroom.
And if I didn't mention it, the pilot project is going to be live streamed on YouTube. So that's exciting. That's different. I mean, if you think about public access, I think that's important. And getting all that together with Judge Hanson, Judge Johnson, taking the lead on that with the help of all the other members of the committee, IT, how many notices had to go out just for the virtual traffic, Kathy?
That was another few thousand, since it was only a week. So we didn't actually change their court date, but we sent them a notice giving them the option of joining for the Zoom court appearance. So all the pilot Zoom appearances next week were optional. And it points out, it gives them the details how to connect to the Zoom courtroom. But if they opt not to, or if they don't have the technology to be able to connect, they'll just get a continuance notice with a new in-person date after the court appearances next week.
And Kathy is correct. The other circuits throughout the state all the other chief judges, as you know, there's 24 chief judges throughout the state, and the other 23 all want a link, and I've sent the link to them. They're very interested to see how it goes, and very excited to see if they can implement the same type of program.
I know it's like shoulder to shoulder in that courtroom every single day, so I could see that being very helpful. But so the journalist in me was going to ask, would someone like me be able to go in still? Is it going to be on a TV with the judge sitting there, like how other counties sometimes do bond court, or you're saying it's going to be live streamed, so people will still be able to watch court?
Correct.
Okay. And you said that's on YouTube?
Yeah. If you go to our website, you'll find the link for the live streaming. If you go to the circuit court website.
Very cool. So this has been, I imagine, something you guys have never had to deal with before. So is this did you have some kind of an emergency plan in place for something like this, or are you just making it up as you go along?
No, we have a plan.
The Coop plan.
This plan is our continuity of operations emergency pandemic plan. As you can see, it's, I don't know, 100 pages.
I guess I always thought we would use that for, like if a tornado hit the building and the building somehow was gone. That's what we always talk about. The Coop plan was for if the building, disappeared.
Right. We never. Go ahead, Kathy. I'm sorry.
Never did I think this would be how we use the Coop plan, for sure.
Right. We always thought it was going to be, tornado, flood, fire. We have to leave the building and maybe use somebody else's courthouse. But with this virus, there's no moving anywhere because you just can't go. And it's been challenging. We've learned a lot. We are going to actually get some benefits about changing practices as a result of what's been forced upon us. But you're right. Nobody would have told me a year ago that this was going to happen.
I have a couple questions related to the traffic court. Not that I'm someone that appears in that court, but when people talk about traffic court, one of the things is like, is the police officer going to show up, and am I going to get out of it because the officer doesn't show up? So I guess my question pertains to attendance. Is there a thought on whether it'll be easier for people to show up or less easy? And then in terms of the general public, in technology, I know that you said it was optional whether to take traffic court right now. Is that based on whether someone would have the technology to be able to accomplish it?
Yeah, that's a factor. I mean, if someone doesn't have a computer, a tablet, a smartphone or something, obviously that's challenging for them. Getting back to your other issue about, the police officer and things of that nature. For this pilot program, these will not be traffic trials, okay? So if you want a trial, you want to show up virtually, and which you have the right to do, and you have the right to plead not guilty, and you have the right to have a trial date will be set, but for the moment, the trials would take place in the courtroom. So that we haven't set it up, or we've been thinking about conducting trials, virtually. But for the pilot program, we're not doing that. We didn't want to bite off more than we could chew the first time going through this.
It's just so different. I'm kind of excited to see how it plays out. And I could
that people show up, that people take it, that people actually, think it's a benefit to them to not have to come here to the building and take advantage of appearing remotely, and that people won't be scared off and, think, oh no, I don't want to give it a try. But so hopefully we'll have enough people who have used Zoom enough during these last couple of months, Zooming with grandma and, everybody else, that they'll feel comfortable enough and want to avoid actually coming to the courthouse. So we really do hope that it's not just the clerk and the judge sitting there in the Zoom meeting waiting for people to appear and nobody appears. So we do hope that people take advantage of it.
I imagine it would be, but I'm sure there are going to be problems here and there that you'll have to kind of hammer out along the way, but I imagine it would be more accessible to a lot of people, especially people who have to like take off work to come to court and have kids with them and then wait. It is so crowded, wait 2 hours just to get a continuance. So in some ways it might be, kind of creating more access to.
Yeah, I agree going forward that I think it will create better access to justice than people get today, having to, fight here into the courthouse and make their way here and take off work and all that stuff.
Right, and especially when we don't want people to bring their family and friends to the building. We need those folks to stay home during this time period. So yes, we're very excited to see how this is going to go.
Are there any thoughts about criminal proceedings going forward? There's a high-profile date coming up in mid-July that we all were planning to be at. Things like that. Is there any thought right now or on the status of those?
Those types of events are being monitored. That'll be up to the trial judge, the state's attorney, the defense attorney, the defendant, so on and so forth, all the stakeholders in each particular, what you might call high profile type event. We're going to have to take into account, and I'm sure the trial judge will take into account spacing, the size of any particular room, who can come in, all of those things. We got our authority to open June 1, as we'll call it, from the Supreme Court. And you may have seen the Supreme Court's order that they issued yesterday along with their guidelines. And, we have to follow that. I don't act and open up the building, so to speak, unless the Supreme Court says I can. So obviously we follow the guidelines that the Supreme Court sets out too.
That's all I have, unless I'm missing anything. I know I was up there very briefly the other day, and it was so eerie. It was like a ghost town. All the chairs were stacked up, and the benches were caution taped off, and someone had to escort me to the elevator. So you guys have covered all your bases, I think.
We're trying, and I didn't mention a particular person who has been very integral in what we've been doing the past 60 days and going forward. And he just put his picture back up on the screen. That's my trial court administrator, Dan Wallace. Dan's been 24/7 on this thing, just outstanding. He's helped write these plans, which we think is what a trial court administrator should do. But he's also gone out in the hallways and put down red stickers for 6 feet apart. So, whatever needs to be done, he just volunteers and jumps in and gets it done. So we wouldn't be the success that we are without Dan, without all of our judges on the virtual matters, our lead judges, Judge Hanson, Judge Johnson. Kathy has been just, I can't say enough about Kathy and her office. It's just really been incredible.